Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really gripping Supreme Court decision that reveals exactly what happens when a public official tries to bypass the designated referee of a massive public fund dispute. We're digging into a real case, GR No. 218870, involving the highest court in the Philippines, the Commission on Audit, and a former governor. It is an absolute masterclass in legal procedure, jurisdiction, and why following the rules of the game is totally non-negotiable when millions in taxpayer money are on the line.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the audit and the millions involved. Then we'll look at a massive procedural blunder, explore the true power of the COA, and finally get to the Supreme Court's final verdict. Let's dive in. Section 1. The Audit and the Millions. Uncovering the Camarines Sur disbursements. Let's take a trip back to between 2006 and 2010. During this time, the former governor of Camarines Sur greenlit a bunch of provincial disbursements. But, eventually, these transactions caught the very strict eye of the Commission on Audit, or COA, and the auditors flagged some seriously massive expenditures. We're talking over 11.5 million pesos just to promote a World Wakeboarding Championship, plus over 6.3 million for security services, 1.7 million for architectural designs of a capital complex and a resort, and some hefty mobilization fees for construction. Why all the red flags? Well, the auditors found they didn't comply with the Government Procurement Act. So what started as routine paperwork suddenly morphed into a high-stakes battle over real public funds, triggering multiple notices of disallowance.
Now, when you tally up all those flagged transactions, it hits exactly 23,408,059 pesos and 37 centavos. To put that into perspective, in the auditing world, a disallowance basically means the spending was deemed irregular, unnecessary, or excessive, and that money has to go back to the government. We aren't talking about spare change here. This is over 23 million pesos that these officials were suddenly personally on the hook to reimburse.
Section 2. A procedural blunder. Missing the window of appeal. Getting a penalty flag from the referee is one thing, right? But the real story here isn't the penalty itself. It's when and where the governor decided to fight it. Let's trace this timeline. Between November and December 2012, provincial auditors officially issued the notices of disallowance. Now, normally if you disagree with an auditor, you appeal right away. But crickets. The governor didn't question them at the time. Because of that silence, in March 2014, the COA issued notices of finality of decision. It actually wasn't until October 15, 2014, literally almost 2 years later, that the governor finally made a move. And instead of going through the audit commission, he went straight to a local regional trial court. He basically asked a local judge to slap a restraining order on the COA to stop them from collecting the money. To understand why going to a local trial court in 2014 was such a massive blunder, we gotta look at the rulebook. Presidential Decree 1445 lays out the exact steps you have to follow. Step 1, you get your notice of disallowance. Step 2, if you're upset about it, you have exactly 6 months to appeal in writing to the COA Commission proper. Step 3, if, and only if, they deny your appeal, then you can go to court. And not just any court, you have to appeal directly to the Supreme Court within 30 days. So here's the absolute kicker. The governor totally skipped this chain of command. He bypassed the COA Commission proper and ran straight to a local trial court long after the buzzer sounded. Because he didn't submit that appeal within the strict 6-month window, those original disallowances legally became what we call final and executory. The clock simply ran out, and as we'll see, you literally cannot rewind it. Which brings us to Section 3, the power of COA, the ultimate referee of public funds. This whole mess raises a huge constitutional question. Can a local trial court judge actually issue a restraining order to overrule the nation's supreme auditor? The local court actually thought so at first, but the 1987 Constitution gives a hard no. It establishes the COA as an independent constitutional commission. Article 9 gives the COA the exclusive power, authority, and duty to examine, audit, and settle all government accounts. It's not a suggestion, it's a hardwired constitutional mandate. They set the rules, they define the audit scope, and they enforce the boundaries on public spending. This perfectly illustrates a major legal doctrine known as primary jurisdiction. Let's de-jargonize that for a second. It basically means that if a case requires the highly specialized training and experience of an administrative body, like the COA, they get the absolute first say. Interpreting complex procurement rules just isn't in the wheelhouse of your average local judge. It's highly technical stuff uniquely suited for COA auditors. You absolutely have to exhaust these administrative steps before you even think about knocking on a courthouse door. And you can see how this builds into a much bigger systemic issue. The Supreme Court pointed out exactly why we can't let local courts interrupt audits. Imagine if any local judge could just halt the COA. It would be absolute chaos. It weakens the COA's authority and causes massive, unnecessary delays. Auditors would spend all their time stuck in local courtrooms defending their findings instead of actually auditing. Plus, it would totally encourage unscrupulous officials to just run to a friendly local judge to dodge accountability. Not to mention, it would completely clog up our already packed trial courts with highly technical auditing disputes. Moving on to Section 4, the final verdict, setting the record straight. So how did the Supreme Court en banc finally resolve this turf war between a local Camarines Sur Court and the Commission on Audit? Well, they didn't mince words. The verdict was definitive. The regional trial court committed a serious jurisdictional error by even taking the case in the first place. The Constitution explicitly limits judicial review of constitutional commissions. Any ruling from the COA can only be challenged in the Supreme Court, period. A local trial court simply has absolutely no power, no jurisdiction, and no business reviewing or blocking COA auditors. So the Supreme Court granted the COA's petition and immediately tossed out the local cases. On top of that, the Supreme Court doubled down on a vital legal principle, the immutability of judgments. Because the governor missed that crucial 6-month deadline to appeal the original notices, the decision was permanently locked in. Once a judgment becomes final, it's final. It can't be modified to fix mistakes of fact, mistakes of law, not even by the highest court in the land. When the clock runs out, the score is final. Those 23.4 million peso disallowances were completely affirmed, meaning the government could officially go ahead and collect that money from the liable officials.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to think about this. Strict legal procedures exist for a very good reason. They're the guardrails keeping public funds from getting lost in endless stalling litigation. These rules and strict timelines, they aren't just bureaucratic red tape. They are the actual engine of government accountability. Trying to bypass the referee and rewrite the rules midway through the game puts the entire system at risk. The Supreme Court made it crystal clear, when it comes to the people's money, the COA's authority is absolute. It leaves us with a critical question to ponder. When public officials try to bypass the rules of the game to avoid accountability, who is ultimately left paying the price? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking those hard questions.